Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today in our Optimising Procurement in Construction webinar with myself, Michael Allison, and my good pal and associate Finbarr Doyle. So just a bit about myself. I'm the Commercial Director at Roma Finance. So I've been in specialist lending now for about 20 years here, and another specialist lender. I've been here at Roma for about 4 years, responsible for everything at the front end of the business, which includes sales, origination, underwriting and credit approval as well. I'd like to introduce you now to Finbarr, who will introduce himself, I'm sure. Over to you, Finbarr.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Finbarr Doyle. I'm the CEO of Procurement for House Builders, P4HB. I've been in supply chain and procurement for 15 years or so, probably a bit longer actually. I'm trying not to admit it. But also, it's interesting. I was thinking about this webinar this morning, and the one thing that I think has sort of stemmed through my whole career, whether my career has been in publishing, my career has been in retail, and then in supply chain, and hence this role now. But the one thing that's sort of run through the whole thing really for me in the last sort of 25, 30 years is risk management. And I think we are very much in the business of risk management. I think that's something we probably share, Michael, in that, you know, ultimately we're here to assess risk, mitigate risk, and see if we can help SME developers go cleanly. And that seems to be an area, construction and property in general, where risk isn't really spoken about in the way that it is in other sectors. So I thought we might maybe touch on that a little bit today.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the intro there, Finbarr. We are going to cover, hopefully get 3 objectives from today. Just before we do start on that, some housekeeping. We're not expecting a fire drill at our end, so if you do see us run off, then there is probably a fire. So, but hopefully you're all sitting comfortable with your coffee. Yeah, sitting comfortable with your coffee. There is a chat box open, so if you do have any questions throughout, feel free to pop them in there, either for myself or Finbarr. As they come through, if we feel it's the right time, we'll look to either answer questions as they occur, or there'll be time for that at the end. But we believe that there's going to be 3 main objectives of today. It's looking at procurement strategy and how it impacts financing on a project. Listen to a bit of something from a lender and what we view when we're assessing a transaction, and how procurement pays its part in it, and also getting some actionable tips to avoid those pitfalls that can often either sink projects early or stop them from even starting at all. And really get that time to run away with it. So we'll be really leaning into Finbarr's expertise in that place. Okay. Next slide, please.
Good.
So let's start off with a poll. There is a bit of interaction, which I'm sure you'll be pleased to know. If you've had a project, have you ever had a procurement issue in a project? So that can be as small or as large as it may be. Over to you guys if you'd like to answer. Okay, straight in, we're at 100%. Now we're down at 50-50. We'll give that a moment to see if there's any more answers. Okay. Interesting. For those who's given to it, I think we've got a bit of a 50-50 split. So we've got some good experts on here. Maybe they can start to give us some tips as we go through as well. But let's move through. And certainly as we move past that, it's really interesting to know that a varying degree. Let's talk about procurement, and I suppose really I'd like to hand over to yourself, Finbarr, and let's get a feel for what you're seeing at this moment in time, and what common pitfalls you do see, and how people can alleviate those.
Sure. Hi everyone. So let me start maybe with a sort of demonstration of why P4 exists, and why we know procurement isn't just about buying and pricing. It's actually a strategy, I think, now for survival and for thriving. If you all remember what happened in 2020 during lockdown, material prices started to increase quite quickly and quite rapidly. And it wasn't so much, it wasn't that the supply chains were shorting or slowing down, but actually DIY and retail and projects started to go mushroom because people had money and they wanted to actually go and spend. And we had huge inflation going on in the sector. And we had only started the year previous, the P4HB business. And And our client wanted to build a 7-apartment, 2 commercial unit new development in southeast London. It had been planned in 2019, executed and ready to go in 2020. Lockdown hit, got delayed, eventually got going in about June 2020. The original budget for that project was 1.8 million in materials. And cut a long story short, we delivered that project on time and on budget at 1.8 million in March of 2022. And we did that not through simply hammering supply chain. It's about leveraging relationships, leveraging value, and understanding what's possible with the relationships, with the availability of materials, and how you leverage that with strong sort of strategies. I think that really set us off on the course of what we do now, which is really to try and understand why SME developers in particular, and we're only really interested in SME developers. We don't work with tier 1 or tier 2. And what most SME developers will typically have contingency built in, but they're probably operating, if things go wrong, if they don't plan properly their procurement strategies, they'll probably have something in the region of maybe 10, 20, 30% of material costs over budget by the time they finish. And that's not, in fact, that's more normal than it is not normal. Over 60% of projects overrun on time and cost by about 20%. So it's pretty common. And what's frustrating to see from our perspective is that we believe it's wholly avoidable, other than seismic changes, which we'll talk about. Seismic changes in supply chain. We believe that and we're optimists at heart. So although we've been through a really tough time in the last 18 months, I think actually we still believe that now is still the right time to go and start building. So yeah, I think the stakes right now are pretty high. We might touch on things like the grey drain, and we might touch on things like what's happening with the most recent news, of course, is Gaza, and what that might do to supply chains, etc. And you can see the trends happening right now, where brick deliveries this year are up, but block deliveries are down, and that's about constraint. It's about supply chain and constraint. So you've got odd things going on in the marketplace, which means you'll have disparities in budgets, because the more available materials are, the lower the price. The less available materials are, the higher the price, etc. So I think, and I think, from coming back to where Roma sit and lending sits, it's at that point that really the procurement strategy and the delivery sort of outcomes need to be set and aligned, because otherwise, really, you're kind of on a bit of a hope and a prayer otherwise, aren't you?
Yeah, ultimately, I think it's that whole timeline. The moment that you start a site, certainly when finance is involved, costs go up. Costs can go up and down on materials, but costs will go up as well on a site if it takes longer than you were expecting it to take. And bearing in mind that that's just the build phase, we know that sales or refinances of the end products are taking longer as well at this moment in time. So it really is a time pressure, and time equals money when it comes to development, certainly.
100%. If you cast your eyes, maybe not everyone on today's session will have enjoyed the 2008 sort of financial crash, etc. But what we learned back in 2008, and we're still living that now, is when demand dies in a seismic shift in the market, capacity dies with it, and when the markets return, supply didn't. And we're still paying that now. So if you think that about 2008 to 2012 was demand was pretty low, capacity was shut down, and then we never really recovered. A really good example of that is in 2007. The UK was annually manufacturing 4 billion bricks per annum, and which is a bit of an overcapacity, if I'm honest with you. But you know, in good years, that was probably not quite enough. The total capacity available in the UK right now, even with the new furnace coming on at the latter part of last year, is now 2 billion. So we've never actually recovered. And so we've got to make sure, and that's one really simple example of understanding what pressures are in the supply chain. And if you're just reacting to, you know, what your demand is going to be when you start to deliver, chances are that you won't be a priority. You won't have the ability to maybe get what you need. And even though demand right now isn't very high relative to where we'd all like to be, actually demand for materials is high elsewhere outside of the UK, and it's going to get really into high demand. You know, if you think about what's happening in sort of the geopolitical sort of arena right now. So yeah, I think we've got our work cut out for us already. I think it's going to get even more difficult without planning right from the get-go. But I think in that also is opportunity for SME developers to really get to grips with what's possible.
Yeah, I think it's also that knock-on effect, isn't it? If any delays can cause issues in other areas, and we know at this moment in time, certainly what we see, any delays on site in either liquidity coming back in, so the ability to get the money from the lender to put back into the next phase, or for the work to be carried out, you've got a real risk of losing the labour that you have lined up. So it sort of goes hand in hand. That's a real pinch point we're seeing with developers at the moment.
We've seen it too, where you think you're ready to go and you're not, because you haven't maybe it's something out of your control as an SME developer. Maybe you haven't, you know, maybe planning have come back to you and delayed you, or what have you. And I hear those reasons why projects get delayed all the time. Is it planning? Is it funding? Etc. And sometimes it genuinely is outside the developer's control. But I think there's a lot of stuff that's inside the developer's control that also causes delay when they're not on top of stuff. And that is
a developer now. Is that developer?
That's a developer now asking me. So that is you know, and typically what that looks like is, you know, they thought they were ready to go. They had what they thought was their supply chain aligned. Something gets delayed in the supply chain, or something isn't what they thought it was, you know, or actually when push comes to shove, they're told that it's going to cost them a lot more for those materials than they had budgeted, etc. And whilst they try and figure that out, they are losing sight of actually the go and the push button. And labour is really short right now. Good skills and good labour is really short right now. So, and they have to gravitate to where the start button is. So if you're planning on going on the 1st of November and you end up going the 1st of January, chances are you've lost your window, you've lost that labour, those gangs, and the trades need to be in line. So you know that could end up actually making the project unfeasible in certain instances.
Yeah, I was speaking to a developer yesterday, and it's the lack of new talent coming into those trades that they don't see that problem being one that's going to get any easier over the next, certainly the next 5 years, maybe 10 years. I think there's a good stat you always use about retirement, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, and actually, you know, so we track a lot of things, not just in terms of price indices and in terms of what is going on in the sort of macro supply chain as well as the micro sort of local level supply chain. We track an awful lot of stuff in our business because we need to know what actually is the next thing that might catch us and our clients out and mitigate that. But there's a sleeping giant of a risk right now. And that is what we're calling, what's beginning to be labelled as the grey drain. So 1 in 5 of the current labour force, and it's shrunk considerably already since COVID. 1 in 5 of the current construction workforce is over 55, and the average retirement age in construction is 62. So in the next 5 years, we're losing 20% of not just the workforce, but the knowledge and the skills and the people who've spent their lives building are leaving. But on top of that, those who are joining, sort of the sort of 18 to 30-year-olds, they're the smallest demographic in construction right now. It's the smallest that demographic has ever been, and that's through, I think, a misalignment of policies and stuff like that. I mean, I know very few of my kids are like 28 and 30. I know very few of those of their generation that have gone into construction. They've all gone to university, or they've all gone on management placements, or they've all done something else in services. I don't know anyone who's gone into construction, because it's not sexy. But we need people to go in there, because otherwise that, I think, is, regardless of what happens in Gaza, or regardless of what happens in Ukraine in the next few years, and what pull that will bring to materials, and it will bring major pull to materials. I think the biggest thing that's going on right now is we don't have a replacement of that exit. And I think Brexit has also exacerbated that problem, because we're not importing those skills. Those skills came to us previously, and now they've gone. Pre-Brexit in London, nearly half of the construction workforce were from overseas, and it's now about 20%. So we've actually designed, or this has all been not intentionally designed, but the net result is here we are.
I think what's interesting as well is this can be relayed to any project of any side of what you're saying. Obviously, you had the £1.8 million build cost for the Southeast London apartments with a bit of commercial. Yeah. But even if I was doing a renovation, or our customers who were doing a renovation of a single unit at this moment in time, all these factors still pay a price, don't they? The trade, procuring the materials, time, cost of the finance going in, it can be used on any level, and the problems are just as big or as small dependent on the scheme, aren't they?
You're absolutely spot on. So if you think about what happened when Russia invaded Ukraine, that cut off a lot of supply chain, because not necessarily in the UK, because we don't buy a lot of Russian timber, for example, or a lot of Russian steel, but a lot of Europeans did. So what's happened now is that supply chain's been cut off. That means that timber from Scandinavia and the Baltics is diverted to the best return markets, which is not the UK, because the UK doesn't pay premium price for anything. And what that means is that whether you could be in North Africa and buying materials that would normally be found on a site in Macclesfield. That's the truth of it. So if you're doing an extension and you're paying a bit more for your timber, that's the reason why, is because we are exposed as a country to price-driven supply chains that will always default to the best return. And the UK has always paid a reasonable price for materials, but it's never been prepared to pay a premium for materials. And the forest growers or the steel manufacturers, they all know that. So when demand spikes somewhere else, that's where the materials go. And so you're spot on. If you're building an extension or a one-off house or a whole estate, that you need to factor these things in. You need to be aware of how to secure, and procurement, we see as procurement isn't about, negotiating price and availability. It's actually now getting to, and it will in 2026, procurement is about priority. It's really about making sure that you get what you need to go. And that's what we try and factor into everything we do in the projects we're on with our clients.
Yeah, it's all very well and good having a Gantt chart, but you need to be able to have the people and the material to deliver each stage of that, and that's how you come on time, and that's how you create your profit.
Yeah, and the profit, profit drain or the profit gain normally comes from efficiencies and from keeping things on track and keeping things tight. So if, for example, you've got a project and the material cost you've budgeted is 2 million quid or £1 million, whatever it might be, normally what happens is that something will go wrong with the supply chain, something inadvertently that wasn't foreseen or not planned properly, means you've got your labor, which are a huge expense, and in short supply, we see it time and again where we go on site and to meet see prospective clients' sites, and you have labour and guys standing around on site because something hasn't turned up. So you're paying for them to stand around and look at each other and not build for materials that you're probably not in control of, and that's where the profit goes. So you can intentionally go and try, design, have a plan to get a return of 25% of a project, but 25% can really quickly drain away, and that becomes seismic for an SME developer. The larger developers can absorb mistakes, and believe me, we've worked with some of them. We know they make bigger, the mistakes they make have bigger consequences, but they can absorb them because they've got maybe several projects going on at once, and so it gets sort of buried in the system. Whereas for an SME developer who's maybe doing one or two projects, a catastrophe like that, where you don't make a profit on a project, or worse, you make a loss, can be the end of not just the project, but maybe even the business.
Absolutely. Let's just move on to the next slide if we can.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's another poll. So obviously before we asked, has it been an issue? Has anyone ever used a procurement service when they've looked to do a scheme? So if you'd like to place your vote now, if you'd like to, just to give us a feel for that. Okay, so it's not something that people are ultimately factoring in. So it's not a service that they've used, and maybe that might be because of the style of developments that people have had. It's really interesting stats. So just move to the next one. I think what would be good now is next slide, please. Is to start thinking about that lender's perspective, and I won't spend too much time on this because obviously this is about the procurement piece. But for us, we always believe is that sites need to be liquid. The moment a site stops, be it your own refurbishment, be it like you said before, it can either be an extension, a refurb, building one house or building multiple houses. The moment the site stops, it's hard to get it started again. There's no bigger risk than and at the same time, you're paying interest on a scheme as well. So what we like to look at is, as part of our onboarding of a new customer, is it's not just have they got the cash to be able to forward fund the project and we come in and sweep through. Can they get it done in the timescale that they're looking to do? And normally timescale, that doesn't just mean can they build the right amount of units within that timescale? Does it give them enough time to exit? But will they have the materials on site to hit each one of those key deliverable stages? Because on any refurbishment and any development, the value of the site goes down before it comes back up. Back to what Finbarr said before, risk, we're all here to mitigate risk. Even the developer, the property investor, we're all there to mitigate risk. You mitigate risk by being at the bottom of that S curve for as least time as possible. Yeah. If you're taking a 2 up, 2 down in Bury in Greater Manchester, the moment you take out the kitchen and the bathroom as part of your refurb, it's devalued. If you take a property and you knock the walls out, or all the windows are out, it's no longer wind and watertight, no longer secure. Or if you're bringing it out from the ground, it's about getting it into that secure state as soon as possible, because that then means you know what you're dealing with. To be able to do that, you need to have the right team around you. So a lender like ourselves at Roma will always validate that team, but will also validate your ability to get the job done through the access to materials that you have. Has that been factored in? Have you done it before? If you haven't done it before, if it's, we are seeing people come to us with more modern methods of construction, making sure that's great. But if you're only getting those, the fire retardant bricks from the only person who supplies them in the UK, and they're coming from Italy and all that, we've got to factor all that risk in to be able to do so. So for us, sites always need to be liquid. And ultimately, cash and the cash on site is king. The work completed is king, because ultimately it's the exit of the transaction. Development finance isn't the cheapest source of finance, but it's the only finance that you can really leverage on to create new assets. Refurbishment bridging will be more expensive than acquisition bridging, again, because of the risk involved of the volatility of the project. So working on that exit and that time scale means that you can protect your equity space. If you're creating, if your end process is to be at 65, 70% loan to gross development value, if you go 2 months past your loan and you incur any fees and extra interest, that 70 could now be 72, 73.
Yeah.
While that's really important, is certainly on the single unit stuff, that can restrict your options at exit. If sales are taking a long time, so you would then looking to maybe retain the asset or the unit. The moment you start going into the mid 70s or beyond, refinance can be really, really tricky to be able to get that clean exit from the loan. Time is a real factor as well, and time normally doesn't come because somebody finished the project really early and got all the materials and did it really well. It normally becomes because they were delayed getting it to the finished state. And that's certainly where we feel that when we're working with borrowers, those who have that clear procurement schedule, the loans are approved faster. And the reason for that is because it's more transparent for us. If we're able to see how they're able to do that. Sorry, Finn, jump in.
No, listen, I totally get that. I totally understand that. I think what's often missed is that, if you think about the sort of the 3 stages that SME developers have to sort of run through. Obviously, it's trying to find sites and get planning for the project itself. Then it's about funding, and then it's about delivery. I think often because there's so many delays in planning and in legals and in getting that story right, that sometimes if they haven't thought about delivery from the start, it becomes potentially an afterthought. And that's when you lose. That's when what you were just saying, about if you get 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, it can be from 70 to 72 to 74. For me, procurement is now becoming the single biggest. I think one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in certain types of developments. Reason for cost overruns and time delays, and the reason for that is because it becomes that sort of it's not baked in when they're talking to people like Roma. I've had conversations with some clients now who we are always trying to elevate our clients up from whether they be not have a procurement strategy and need us to where do you want to get to and what do you want to be able to do in a year's, 2 years time. One of the things that's a real acid test for us is when you go for funding, do you know what it's going to cost you? And do you have price surety or certainty that that's what it is actually going to cost? And we can help them do that. And that's what we essentially do, apart from delivery of materials. And we know that every time that a client of ours goes for funding and has that pack and is sorted out in their head what it's going to cost and can validate it and verify it and actually show that the value engineering is already beginning to take place, that lender is going to be far more readily supporting that project and the individuals behind it because they actually know what they're doing. And it doesn't always go to plan. That's what we're here for too. But we'll always help move those mountains out of the way and get you as close to where you want to get to as possible as part of that team. Ultimately, what we try and do is help our clients go again. That's what our sort of asset test is. And if they can go with the same lender and do another project with that same lender, having worked through with us what's required, then that's a real win for us, and we'll go again and again and again with those clients.
Yeah, ultimately, it's about trying to control the controllables.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if you're doing a scheme, you can't control if we're going to get Storm Ava, Storm Bravo, Storm Charlie, whatever storm we're going to get. It seems there's one every 2 weeks. You can't control geopolitical. You can't control where we stand on the ability for people to buy the end units. Or what you can control is getting your build done within the build phase of your program. Yes. To give you enough time to look at that exit and to run it to schedule. That's within your gift. Everything else is the speed bumps that we've had since 2018. I think it was 2019, certainly since the Brexit vote, and this continues to happen. There's been lots of change in lanes for everybody who's been involved in property and in finance and in construction. But ultimately, if you can control the controllable, it gives you a better chance to deliver on time, on budget, which then enables you to extract the profit that you were requiring, or provide that buffer in place. We have actually got a question in. I'm going to just open that up. This is from Alex Harrington Griffin. Thank you, Alex, for asking the question. I'll point this one towards Finn, if that's okay. So this, can I ask, when it comes to choice of consultants on a project, what some of the first checks that a lender would do to assess their fit as a service provider on that scheme? So I guess that will be me, actually, rather than you.
That is you.
Yeah. Ultimately, one of the first checks we always look for is, are they the suitable consultant for the scheme that you're looking to do? And that will also be about your build team as well. If you're looking to do a build, are they suitable for the scheme that you're doing? Is it somebody who's used to doing extensions who you've now employed to do a commercial to residential conversion? Have you got that right skill set in place? We will also look at the background, where necessary, of that trading company. So we will go onto somebody's website and have a look around. We may look into the publicly available information that we can get through some of our search engines to make sure that you're dealing with a liquid partner, that they do have the right insurances in place if you're going to be relying on those insurances. Because for us, they're part of the whole program. As a lender, we're your majority business partner to a successful transaction, because we're putting in normally most of the cash. And then for you to extract that profit at the end, we need to ensure that the people who are coming into this agreement that you're bringing on board are suitable. So for us, it's always about relevant skill set and making sure that there's no gremlins in the cupboard that's going to make them go, not be part of the project as we continue forward. So liquidity is key for everybody. Hope that answers your question, Alex. Okay, should we move to the next slide? I think we've got another poll. Okay, so is the procurement of materials ever a worry in a project? I don't think we've covered that one so far. So we said, have we struggled, or have we ever used anybody? But before somebody goes into it or halfway through, does this become will the kitchens turn up on time? A big one that we see in apartments, lifts. You know, can we get the lift on time? Because everything centers around that. What about you guys? Is it a worry that we're seeing out there at this moment in time? We've got a couple of honest answers to come back for us with a yes. I don't know, nice balance. So it's interesting. We're forming more to part two. So we've got people who have had issues in the past. That was about 50-50. People who's used procurement providers, that was 0 on what we've seen so far. But then actually for the worry on the project, it is stemming to people have seen more of that. So that's really interesting to sort of see. So let's go back to you, Finn, if that's okay, and move to the next slide, please. Give us a feel for what are the best practices that the people attending today's webinar or watching it on Catch Up can do.
I think so we've always encouraged SMEs to look around the room at the team they've already got and see what strengths they've already got inside their team. And if they've got good procurement and that's not a concern for them, hang on to those people like those guys and girls are gold, right? I promise you they're gold. If you've got someone who's doing it well for you and not causing you the pain on the coal face. There might be pain inside the office in dealing with that sort of stuff, and there always is. But if they're actually delivering to your site and materials you need on time, in the right quantities for your contractors to flow, then please invest and grow those individuals, because there aren't an awful lot of those people around. If you do, try and get them involved, not at the stage of delivery. Get them involved when you're talking to people like Roma. Get them involved in actually pricing up your project that you're going to fund, so you know what it's going to cost you. Too often I've seen, if you think about the planning system, you might get a project through planning. It might have been last year, and now you're actually thinking about going, and you want to go to funding, but your pricing has been done by QS on a square meter rate that might be 8 months old, 12 months old. It's already, on the day he issued it or she issued it, it's probably a guess game, and now it's out of date. You can't rely on that to be able to ascertain what your budget should be. And so I'd be encouraging SMEs to get to the brass tacks on their projects, to actually really understand what the cost of materials and labor are before you actually finalize and sign a lending document, and before you ask a lender to fund it. Because it means that you know exactly where you're going to be. And again, that's hard to do on a square meter rate, but we're building systems now that will enable SMEs to be able to live price their projects, either just once they've got their planning, or even during planning we can help them, but certainly as they're talking to lenders, so that lenders get confidence, every stakeholder in the business gets confidence that what it's going to cost is real and tangible. And I think also, I see developers, point, at reasons why it didn't work. Ultimately, what you've just said previously, about making sure that you are in control of everything you can be. We see that some developers are when it comes to procurement, hoping that they'll be able to get what they asked for, maybe 3 months ago. Can you be able to supply this, blah, 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 blah. And in a market where volatility is still key, and it's always going to be a volatile market, I think, now going forward, and the UK is typically a volatile market anyway. I think SMEs should be getting much more strategic about how they view procurement, and actually much more strategic about how they execute procurement in part of their delivery process. Because without a procurement strategy, without someone really understanding what it is that is going to ensure that just-in-time delivery of materials, so you've got minimum waste, minimum shrink, minimum downtimes, you're able to flow and build and go again and again and again. If you build that flow into your systems, and you codify what you're building, that will enable you to do a whole lot more often, and maybe scale your business too. And so we're working with a number of developers, SME developers now, and using procurement as their core for scale. That's their core strategy in order to scale their business. And if you can, the planning, can't do an awful lot about planning if you're stuck in planning. Lending, you definitely can do something. Procurement, you could do everything with. If you get that right, you could do a whole lot more.
I suppose what that does for you as well is it enables you, the quicker you get the project done and through, back to what you're saying, the asset says, it's the quicker you're on to the next one, and you got that scalability, and you can extract your cash out and move into the next scheme. It's thinking about, it's not just the scheme that you're on, sometimes it's about that conveyor belt of continuing to grow your business, isn't it?
Yeah, I think if you just strip it back down and you think about what GDP is in a country. So if you think about GDP is how many times we exchange the same money. That's what GDP essentially is. So if I've got 20 quid and I want to buy something, I might hang on to 2 and give you 18 and so on. Or I might give you the 20 because I'm confident in you, and I might get my money back and go again and again and again. And if you think about your capital as how often can I cycle it, and you bring that back into your strategy and say, how do I shorten my lead times? How do I shorten my delivery times? How do I get surety and risk mitigation built in and baked into my systems? Then you can utilize cash again and again and again. And the confidence build, and here's the thing, we all talk about, and I get frustrated when people talk about, there's a lack of confidence. There is a lack of confidence in the market. But the lack of confidence is all in us. It's not market confidence. We're all not confident, okay? But if you have people and surround yourself with good people, and you understand who's really good at their jobs, and then infill on those who aren't, and you start to really build confidence of that, of your stakeholders, and you go and you deliver on time and on cost, that of itself builds confidence. Not going, which is a lot of what we're seeing right now, not going actually feeds a lack of, that lack of confidence. So I think we're in that sort of tipping point now. I think we see a lot of clients who we think they're just about to go, because what are they waiting for? You know, it doesn't matter what happens in the November statement anymore. It really doesn't matter, because whatever happens, everyone's in it.
Yep. And we still don't have enough homes. You know,
No.
the underlying thing is that we've still, you know, there's this commitment to generate more houses or more homes or whatever it may be. We still don't have it, so we still got to be. Sometimes it's better to go, but go prepared, rather than wait for, you know. Don't let what is it they say is don't let excellence be the enemy of good. You know, if you're in a good position, you're in a good position. Let's go for it.
Yeah, and you're spot on. You don't have to be, you know, you're waiting for perfection is basically procrastination, isn't it? Right? Because that's all it is. But you know, what we always try and do is, in the schedules we produce for clients, and they be their procurement schedules, their supply chain schedules, and delivery schedules, their drawdown schedules. We produce all of those, but really what we're doing there is we're saying, look, this procurement sort of strategy that we're encouraging you to adopt isn't about the price of a bag of cement, isn't about the price of 4x2 or blocks or bricks or steel. Actually, it's got nothing to do with that. It's cash flow management, and it's about getting from A to B as quickly as possible. That's what real good procurement is. And we often get, I've seen it happen with, particularly for contractors who've moved into development. I see it more in those areas where you have you know, people still thinking that it's more important to get 5p off a bag of cement than it is to actually make sure that you guys aren't standing around. And therein lies, you know, that's what you really need to flip and say, look, none of that really matters. You'll pay the market value for your materials, but if you can go on time and deliver on time, you get your cash back quicker, and that's more important than anything else.
Just one thing I don't think we've touched enough. I think you did touch on it slightly earlier, but how important do you think technology is going to? How important part will technology play within this? The digital tools that people can use, because I think that's the key. It's great to get started, but then you have to track it and make sure everything runs alongside.
Yeah, it's huge, and I think given the fact that we've got what we said before about, you know, we've got constraints on supply chain, we've got market volatility in pricing, and we've got the grey drain. Really, for us, there's the key behind technology in procurement is really about understanding from the get-go and systemizing and codifying projects as much as possible. And I can go into what I mean by systemizing and codifying. But we're also now on our system, we're building a full takeoff and estimating tool, which is a live estimating and pricing tool that, you know, and that we want to get to the stage where when you scan in drawings, you're able to not only produce those schedules and procurement schedules and phasing of build, but also live price it. And then you can share that with clients and share that with stakeholders and lenders, so that everyone is looking at the same set of information and everyone can see exactly what is happening. And then when you do push go, that you're able to see what's arrived on site, you're able to see what's coming next, you're able to see what's been delivered and is building, and you're able to really utilize platforms to be able to all have the same conversation and understand where potential bottlenecks are arising. And we're investing in AI, not just to enable us to do that, but also then able to scenario run, you know, where with all the information we gather, you know, whether that be macroeconomic or geopolitical or simply in the supply chain, alongside a 3 build in, I don't know, in leafy Surrey. What is the impact of everything there? And run scenarios of what might happen over here. And we're building that technology to be able to say, here's what we need to have a conversation about, because in 2 months' time, this will become an issue unless we mitigate it now. So we're really, you know, we see that AI and the platform we're on, which is Procore, and the API sort of technologies that we built on, we see that as absolutely the only way that you can utilize your labor force, deliver on time, and deliver on the budget and the promise that you gave to your stakeholders.
I suppose what it also does, it helps with drawdown management. So if you're on a drawdown transaction, so that normally is you go away, you complete a work completed, buy materials, a quantity surveyor or monitoring surveyor will come out from the lender and confirm that that's what's been done in appropriate with the schedule, and then you
100%.
reimburse with those funds. Using technology just makes it a bit easier than somebody think, you know, a pile of receipts, a pile of invoices, and trying to put it all together. Because you know, time is money as well, you know, and then you can spend the time more in having those quality conversations or looking at the exit or making sure things are moving on site rather than just making sure it's being a paperwork exercise. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and for us, because of the way we work, I'm not saying other sort of alternatives to P4 work the same way, but the way we work is that we are a one-point contact. So if you're doing a project, you don't have 25 suppliers to deal with. You've got us. We are we deal with all that headache and take all that pain away so you can flow. And that means that you don't have all of those all that pain on your desk. Actually, that's our pain that we take away. And I think for SMEs who want to go again and want to flow and want to grow, why are you looking at that stuff? It's we find that 30% of a developer's time is spent doing that sort of stuff. 30% of a contractor's time is spent doing what we do in terms of procurement. We take all of that away so that actually you can utilize yourself, your team, and your contractors to be able to do what you pay them to do, which in the contractor's terms is build. So, and I think, using technology to wash away all that noise, that's what we're heavily investing in over the next few years.
I guess if you factor that cost in at the onset and you understand that when you're making the deal stack, you're an even better chance because you're applying the time to achieving that profit margin that you set out to do, which enables you to cycle back through and have that success.
100%. I think given the sort of the factors that we've spoken about, I genuinely believe that whether people knock on our door, they need to knock on someone's door when it comes to procurement, because I think it's becoming a non-negotiable to be able to deliver profitably. I think that is the truth now, is that if you don't have procurement nailed into the heart of your business, then actually you are going to fail, or you certainly won't be as strategically capable as those who are locking into the middle of their business.
Unless you're buying it cash and you've got all the time in the world. That's the different thing. But if you're using finance, it's key. Just move to the next slide, please, just to bring it into a bit of conclusion. Because obviously, as always, you and I could talk all day when we're together. I think it's interesting. The key, hopefully, the key things that people will take away from today is having that alignment between procurement strategy and financing does prevent those costly missteps and enable you to go a bit quicker. Certainly, sitting in the lender's seat, we value that transparency. And if we can mitigate risk and have certainty on costs, we know that the upside is all the borrowers, rather than having to eat into the upside to get a scheme finished in the future. But having that operational discipline and adopting technology where possible and embracing the change. AI won't replace the bricklayers, they won't replace the plumbers, they won't replace the electricians, but certainly what they can replace is the time wasted in actually having that procurement process, not just lining it up, but making sure it's delivered and looking for any stoppages as well. So if you were able to take anything away from today, it'd be to look at your current procurement and financing alignment. Some people are really good. If they're a local person, know the local builder's yard, and they're able to flip through, that's great. But sometimes you may step outside of an area that you may step into a different type of scheme. Again, having the right partners in there, and maybe take some of our lender insights to strengthen your next pitch as well. And it is about bringing people into your team or into your journey that you perhaps might not have done in the past. Is there anything in particular that you wanted to add on top of that, Finn, before we go?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the people who've joined us today, whoever watches this later on, I think the one question one statement I'd make is, look, early alignment on procurement and finance is no longer a nice to have. I think it's a necessity. I'd urge people to look inward on their business, whether they've got a project about to go, or whether they've just finished a project, or whether they're, whatever stage they are in their business, and really maybe conduct some sort of internal audit, or we can help with that. And the question I'd be asking an SME right now is, does my lender understand my procurement strategy? And if you can't explain a procurement strategy to your lender, then you haven't got a procurement strategy. And I'd leave you with that to say, if you can get to that point, you're already winning.
And that feels like a really good place to leave today's webinar. Thank you very much, Finbarr Doyle, for joining us. Just move to the next slide, please. We have got another one coming up in November. We're actually going to be speaking to the right architect can maximize your project's return on investment. So join us there on Tuesday, the 18th of November. Obviously, we've had a few people join us today. We had some questions come in that we've been able to answer. If you just move to the next slide, there should be a QR code for those of you who need it. I think you can contact us here at Roma. We will be sharing we will be emailing a copy of the webinar out to people as well, and that will have in Finbarr's contact details as well. You can get access to them via Roma, or you can just contact us directly as well. And
good. And the last thing to say is, look, if there's anything else that I can help anyone with, or if anyone wants to get in touch, then either contact Michael and he'll give you my details, or contact directly. That's fine. I'd love to hear from you guys.
Hopefully you got a lot from today, and thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.